This is my introduction to Sailing Wilson on YouTube. I own a 2013 Island Spirit catamaran, 38 foot in length, and I really love my boat. I'm sure you've heard this before, but please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and push on the notification bell. That'd help a lot. By the way, please share my videos with other people you know. I'm currently on the hard stand at Reback Island Shipyard, which is in the top middle of the photograph. Reback Island is a resort island just off the main island of Langkawi in Malaysia. Here's a Google Earth image of my boat just beside the blue dot on the hard stand. And here's a photograph of my boat just after I finished putting the copper coat on. I've still got a lot of work to do. I removed the drawers and took them down underneath the boat and put them on the bench and began the process of removing the old rusted rails. The screws were locked in place with rust and it was quite difficult to get them off. Here are the new rails ready for painting, and some old ones that are so badly rusted that I ended up throwing some of them out. Because of the rust problem from the water in the drawers and the slides for the drawers, I spray painted them black. This lot of black I cleaned off the rust. Unfortunately I'm not happy with it, so I'm going to buy new ones. I'll have to spray paint them as well. Here's an example of how bad they get, and they're just not repairable. If I did repair them, they wouldn't last too long at all. Then, using the air sander, I cleaned up the bottoms of the drawer rails. I taped them off using 3M blue tape and creating a dam to pour epoxy in. I tried to repair some of them by just pouring epoxy straight in, but it didn't work. So there are the other two. I've got three of them all together. And I mixed up part A and part B of the Kosan 90 epoxy resin, and here I am taking out part A and part B into a mixing cup, and because I did one draw at a time, I measured using a syringe to make it easier, because I had trouble with them not going hard. I added some West Systems 413 microblend to thicken up the epoxy so that it would go harder quicker and not seep through the 3M blue tape dam walls that I'd created. Then, using a spatula and just bending the cup enough to make a funnel, I poured in the epoxy, being careful not to spill it over. It's pretty hard when you shake as much as I do. I had levelled out all three drawers so they weren't on an angle, so that when I poured the epoxy they would self-level, so I wouldn't have to sand too much off. That wasn't quite successful because I ended up sanding a fair amount off. I overfilled them. So here's a view of them the next morning they'd gone hard without a problem and they were ready to sand. And you can see while they're on the edge how I'd laid too much fiberglass in there, epoxy resin in there, and it meant a lot of work cleaning it up. So the edges of the bottoms of the drawers have been epoxied, and I'll sand them off and get the right depth again. Obviously I put too much epoxy on, so that will be an extra bit of work. Hopefully it'll turn out okay. So here I am sanding them down to the right level so that they would slide into the gap for the drawers. Because of the rust problem from the water in the drawers and the slides for the drawers, I spray painted them black. This lot of black I've cleaned off the rust. Unfortunately I'm not happy with it, so I'm going to buy new ones. I'll have to spray paint them as well. Here's an example of how bad they get, and they're just not repairable. If I did repair them, they wouldn't last too long at all. So here they are painted up, or spray painted up with a primer and a black coat for steel, and then I went about screwing them on. And here is the rails we've already screwed onto the drawers, and you can see from that there's one that goes on the drawer and one that goes on the wall of the cupboard, and they're different. One runs into the gutter of the other. Here is the drawer after I'd cleaned it up with a sander, and if you look closely you'll see that I drilled out the old screw holes and I put epoxy into the old screw holes and then sanded them back to make them smooth. Well, I finally finished the railing on the drawers. They're in place. And I've finished putting in and lining up the new railing. And as you can see, it's I've painted them black, and hopefully they'll not rust as much as they will, because after all it is steel and we are on a boat in salt water, so we'll see what happens. Once I've trialled and tested them, I'll probably end up painting them inside the drawer walls with a white finish to help protect them from any further water damage and rust damage, but I won't do that until I've finished a whole heap of other jobs on the boat and get the boat back in the water. While I was repairing the bottom rails of the drawers with epoxy, I didn't realise my fingers had left wet epoxy all over the black surface on the front of the drawers. Also, in the process of fitting the drawers in there, I didn't realise that the knobs, which you press in and out to lock, similar to that one there, were made of plastic. And because I hadn't quite adjusted it properly when I closed it too rough, and it broke the plastic locking mechanism on two of those drawers, so I'll have to source and my new circular locks. I know I can get them in Thailand, but in Malaysia that's another story. Just a little bit of incidental trivia. This is what happens when you don't paint your sail drives. You'll see the big corrosion hole in the drive halfway down. Here's my drive and propeller, properly painted with a product called Prop Speed, and it wasn't cheap at $500 Australian dollars. Next week's video will be about the repairs on my old and worn out dinghy, both the rubber tubing and the fiberglass fore and bottom. So I'm getting very, very close to being able to put the boat back in the water. So the video was produced by myself, and that's the end of another exciting video of my haul out progress report, part 18 at Rebak Island Shipyard in Malaysia.